The sun rose slowly over the hills of Adumfa village, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Roosters crowed from distant compounds, goats bleated, and women's laughter floated from the streams as they pounded clothes on rocks, the rhythm echoing like drums. Before we continue, make sure subscribe to African Tales Haven for more powerful stories of hope, mystery, and wisdom, and comment, where from you watching? So in Africa they say, when the sun rises, it does not rise for one man alone, but for all. Yet for Kofi, a poor farmer, it often felt like the sun rose only to remind him of his struggles. Kofi was in his early 30s, lean from years of labor, his hands calloused like the bark of an old baobab. His farm lay on the edge of the forest, where the soil was rich but stubborn, demanding sweat before it gave back grain. That morning he walked barefoot across his field, the red earth cool under his toes. His hoe rested on his shoulder, and from the distance, children shouted greetings. "Kofi, don't dig too hard or you'll wake the ancestors," one of them cried, and the others laughed. Kofi smiled wearily. "If the ancestors are sleeping beneath this soil, maybe they will wake up and help me weed." The children ran off toward the river, leaving him alone with the field. He knelt, pressed his palm into the soil, and whispered a quiet prayer. "Asaseya, Mother of the Earth, give me strength today. Let these hands not return empty." Then he began to work. The sound of metal striking soil, chink, chink, rose into the air. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Birds chirped in the forest nearby, and somewhere in the distance, a talking drum began to echo, a rhythm signaling the start of market day in the village square. Hours passed. His back ached, but he pushed on. His family depended on whatever he could pull from this stubborn ground. Then suddenly, his hoe struck something solid. Clang! Not the dull thud of stone, not the crunch of a buried root. This was different. It rang like iron. He paused, breathing hard, and leaned on his hoe. What is this, a buried pot, or the old cooking pot of some ancestor? Curiosity gnawed at him. Dropping to his knees, he brushed the dirt away and froze. Beneath the soil was a smooth, dark surface, cold to the touch. As he cleared more, strange lines appeared, glowing faintly like fireflies trapped in metal. His heart raced. He pulled back, staring wide-eyed. Just then, Kwame, an older villager carrying firewood, passed by. "Kofi, what are you doing there, eh? Kwame, come and see." My hoe struck something strange in the soil. Kwame set down his load, walked closer, and when he saw the faintly glowing surface, his eyes widened. He quickly made the sign of the cross and stepped back. "Hey, Kofi, leave it alone. Don't you know the elders say the ground keeps secrets deeper than the grave? You will bring curses on yourself." "But Kwame, this is no ordinary thing. Look at it. Have you ever seen soil glow like fireflies in the day?" Kwame shook his head, fear written across his face. "I will not stand here and watch you wake things that should remain asleep. Fill it back with earth. Forget you ever saw it. I beg you." And with that, Kwame hurried off, firewood clattering against his back. Kofi stared after him, breathing unevenly. He turned back to the glowing surface, hands trembling. His hoe had uncovered the edge of something, a door, perhaps, with iron rings at the top buried deep. The faint hum rose again, like the beating of a distant drum, steady and low. He should have walked away. He should have listened to Kwame. But hunger and hardship make men bold, and curiosity opens doors that were never meant to be touched. Kofi leaned forward, pressed his hand against the cold, glowing metal, and felt it pulse back like the heartbeat of something alive. The ground trembled. The door was waiting. The air around Kofi seemed to thicken, heavy as if the earth itself held its breath. He stumbled back, his heart racing. The glowing lines spread wider across the surface, forming strange patterns like the weaving of a spider's web. He whispered to himself, "This cannot be real. Am I dreaming under the sun?" But the ground beneath his knees was real. The sweat dripping into his eyes was real, and the faint vibration in the soil shook through his bones. Kofi pressed his ear closer, and he swore he could hear a hum, steady, mechanical, like the sound of grinding stone, yet alive, like a deep heartbeat. Suddenly, the faint outline of a handle revealed itself on the strange surface. Two iron-like rings, fused into the door, glowed faintly with blue light. His first instinct was to run, to cover it back and forget. But his second instinct was louder, the instinct of a man who had lived in poverty all his life. He thought, what if this is treasure? What if the ancestors left something here for me? He dug more, soil flying with each swing of his hoe. Dust rose in the hot afternoon air until the full shape of the structure appeared, a massive rectangular slab, smooth and seamless, except for the rings. When his hands finally cleared the last of the dirt, he grabbed the iron rings and pulled. At first, nothing happened. Then, the ground beneath him shook. A hiss escaped from the cracks as if the earth itself exhaled.
With a groan like thunder, the slab began to move, sliding open, revealing a darkness beneath so deep it seemed bottomless. Kofi leapt back, choking on dust, eyes wide. The darkness inside wasn't empty, it pulsed with a dim, bluish glow, like lightning captured underground. He dropped his hoe and whispered, "Asacia, protect me. What have I done?" From the village, he heard voices. Some of the children were returning, chasing one another, their laughter echoing closer. Afua, a small girl, spotted him and shouted, "Kofi! What are you doing? Did you find yams?" He quickly waved them away. "Go home. This is no place for children." The children laughed, but something in his tone made them stop. They saw the gaping hole in the ground and their smiles faded. One of them muttered, "A spirit's gate," before running off toward the village. Kofi stood at the edge, staring into the strange light below. His mind battled itself, fear on one side, hope on the other. Then a cool breeze rose from the hole, brushing against his sweat-soaked face. It carried with it a smell, not of soil or roots, but of metal, smoke, and something sharp, like burning firewood mixed with lightning. And in the wind, he thought he heard a voice. Not a voice of man, but something mechanical, ancient yet strange, whispering in a language he could not understand. Kofi staggered back, shaking his head. "No. I must be tired. I am only hearing the forest." But the voice came again, faint, rising from the depths, "Enter." Kofi's blood froze. His heart hammered. The door yawned wider, the light brighter, the hum louder. The farmer who had begun his day with nothing but a hoe and hope now stood at the threshold of something no man in his village had ever seen. A door, not to a cave, but to something greater. The future was waiting. Kofi stood trembling at the edge of the gaping doorway. His hoe lay forgotten in the dust behind him. Every sensible thought screamed at him to close the slab, to bury it again, to walk away and never return. But something inside, curiosity, desperation, maybe destiny, pulled him forward. He whispered, "If the ancestors have chosen me to see this, how can I turn away?" Gripping the iron rings for balance, he lowered one foot onto the stone steps revealed beneath the slab. The steps were not carved like those of the village shrine. They were smooth, perfect, as though no hand had ever touched them. With each step down, the hum grew louder. The walls glowed faintly, covered with lines of blue light that pulsed like rivers. They weren't painted, they moved, flowing like living fire through veins in the stone. Kofi reached out and brushed the wall with his fingertips. It was cool, almost icy, and the moment he touched it, the lights flared brighter, racing down the tunnel. He snatched his hand back, his breath quick and shallow. "This is not of men," he muttered. "This is something else." The air inside was different. It smelled of smoke and metal, but also something he had never known before, like rain before a storm, sharp and electric. Deeper he went, until the light revealed a vast chamber below. His mouth fell open. The ceiling arched high above him, curving like the inside of a giant shell. Along the walls stood strange pillars, tall and silver, humming softly. At their base were objects he could not understand, shapes that gleamed like polished stone, boxes with lights that blinked like fireflies. At the center of the chamber was something that made him stumble to his knees. It was a chair, but not a chair. A seat made of shining metal, glowing with soft blue light, hovering just above the floor as though it floated on air. Around it, a circle of symbols spun slowly, projected into the air like spirits dancing in light. Kofi whispered, his voice trembling, "The gods, no, this is something else." He wanted to run. Yet he could not move. His eyes were locked on the chair. It was as if it called to him. And then, the hum shifted. Louder. Deeper. The glowing patterns on the walls began to change, forming strange shapes, circles, stars, spirals. The chamber responded to his presence, as though it had been waiting for him. Suddenly, a flash of light burst from the center. The symbols in the air rearranged themselves, and in a voice that was neither man nor machine, the chamber spoke, identity. Unknown. Kofi dropped to the ground, covering his head. His whole body shook. The voice continued, steady and cold. DNA. Match required. The glowing chair pulsed brighter, its surface shifting like liquid silver, forming shapes as though it was alive. Kofi's lips trembled. I should not be here. I should not be here. But in the pit of his stomach, he knew something, this chamber, this place, this future, it had chosen him. And with that thought, the chair lit up, casting a glow that filled the entire chamber like the rising sun. The light from the floating chair grew so bright that Kofi shielded his eyes. He wanted to run back up the stone steps, but his feet refused to move. The air around him crackled with energy, making the tiny hairs on his arms stand straight. Then, without warning, the light softened, and before him appeared a vision, shapes of people, cities, and skies, floating in the air like spirits caught in glass. Kofi's eyes widened. He saw towers of shining metal stretching into the clouds, taller than any tree he had ever known. Roads glowed with streams of carriages that moved without horses. Men and women dressed in strange clothing spoke to glowing objects in their hands. He gasped. This cannot be our world. The vision shifted again. Fields of crops swayed, but machines, not people, tended them. Iron beasts with arms of steel planted seeds, watered soil, and harvested grains. He saw rivers with bridges of light, skies filled with great birds that were not alive but made of metal, carrying people across the heavens. Kofi whispered, "Is this the future?" The chamber answered in its cold, steady voice, accessing temporal archive. Displaying possible outcomes. The visions changed again. This time, Kofi saw something darker. Cities burning. Skies choked with smoke. Crowds running in terror as fire fell from above. Men with weapons of light destroyed everything in their path. No, no. Kofi staggered backward, shaking his head. The ancestors did not show me this. The voice continued, unmoved by his fear, humanity. At risk. Survival depends on choices made. And then, the strangest vision of all appeared. Kofi saw himself. He was older, dressed not as a poor farmer but in strange, rich garments. He stood in front of people who bowed their heads, as though waiting for his command. Behind him was the same floating chair, only brighter, alive, as if it was part of him. Kofi's heart pounded. Me? No. I am just a poor man. This cannot be me. The symbols spun faster around the chair, and the voice spoke again, louder now, candidate selected. Probability of survival. Increased. The floor beneath him trembled. The glowing patterns on the walls surged like waves of lightning. The chair floated closer, pulsing with light, until it hovered right in front of him. Kofi stumbled back, but the voice called once more, "Enter. The future awaits." Kofi stood frozen, torn between terror and destiny. His chest heaved as he whispered to himself, "If this is truly the path the spirits, or whatever this is, have chosen for me, then I must know more." Slowly, his trembling hand reached toward the chair. And the moment his skin touched the glowing surface, the chamber exploded with light. The blinding light swallowed Kofi whole. His body felt weightless, as though he had been lifted out of his own skin. His eyes widened in shock. But just as quickly, the bread turned to dust, crumbling through his fingers. His stomach twisted. A world with so much, but is it real? The voice from the chamber echoed in his mind, even here in this strange future, abundance without balance leads to collapse. The vision shifted again, darker now. The towers of glass cracked and shattered. The skies filled with smoke. The flying machines crashed into flames. People screamed, fighting over scraps of food, tearing at one another like wild animals. Kofi's chest heaved as he fell to his knees. No, no, this cannot be the future of our people. But then, amidst the chaos, he saw it again, himself. Older, stronger, standing tall before a crowd. In his hand was a staff glowing with the same symbols from the chamber. Behind him, the great floating chair hovered like a guardian. The voice whispered once more, "You have seen. You must choose." The vision shattered into pieces of light, and Kofi was pulled backward, his body dragged through time itself, until, with a sudden gasp, he was back in the chamber. The chair floated silently before him, waiting. Kofi clutched his chest, his heart pounding like a drum. His eyes, once filled with fear, now carried something new. A fire. This is no dream. This is a test. And I must decide what to do. The chamber grew silent again. The hovering chair pulsed with light, symbols racing across its surface as though it were breathing. Kofi stepped closer, his fists clenched. If this is a test, then show me what I must do. The air shimmered, and before him, the ground transformed into a vast river of light. From the river, images rose like smoke, villagers toiling in his fields, children crying from hunger, men and women with tired, empty eyes. Kofi's heart ached. He knew these faces. They were his people. But then, another image appeared. Tables overflowing with food. Bags of gold stacked higher than a man. Shiny tools that plowed the earth without effort. And there he was seated upon a throne made of grain, feasting alone while the villagers stood outside, watching with hollow eyes. He staggered backward. No, no, that is not me. I would never. The voice of the chamber cut him off. Power corrupts those who hoard. Do you share or do you consume? Suddenly, the chamber shook. The river of light split into two paths before him. On the left, a golden road leading to wealth beyond imagination. His hands touched piles of treasure, fields bursting with harvests, and machines that obeyed his every command. He saw himself becoming the richest man alive, his name remembered forever. On the right, a humble dirt path, leading to a village. His own people. Their hands reached for him, not for his gold, but for his leadership. He saw himself guiding them, teaching them, helping them rise together. The chair glowed brighter. Choose your road. Kofi's hands trembled. His breath came fast. He thought of the hunger in his belly, the debts that weighed upon him, the years of toil under the sun. The golden road called to him like a sweet voice, whispering promises. But then he remembered the children's faces, the same children who played near his farm, laughing even with empty stomachs. He remembered his father's words, "A man's true wealth is measured by what he gives, not what he keeps." His jaw tightened. He lifted his chin. I choose my people. The golden road flickered and vanished. The humble dirt path blazed with light, and suddenly Kofi was walking upon it. The villagers appeared beside him, no longer weak but strong, their fields green, their homes filled with joy. The chamber's voice thundered, "You have passed the first trial. But many more await." The river of light dissolved. Kofi found himself back before the hovering chair. Its surface shifted again, and this time a glowing doorway opened at its side. Beyond the doorway lay a swirling storm of stars and shadows. Kofi swallowed hard. He had no idea what waited on the other side. But he knew he could not turn back. He stepped forward, into the unknown. the doorway swallowed Kofi whole. He stumbled forward, his body weightless as stars and shadows spun around him. Then, with a jolt, he landed on hard stone. He looked up and froze. He was no longer in the chamber. He was standing in the middle of a vast city, but it was not like any city he had ever seen. Towers of glass and steel rose high into the sky, glowing with strange lights. Roads hummed with machines that floated without wheels, and giant screens shimmered with colors too bright to be real. Kofi's breath caught. This is the future. But the beauty of it didn't last. The sky above the city turned dark. Sirens wailed. One by one, the towers cracked and fell. Fire roared from the ground. Screams filled the air. People ran in terror, but no matter where they went, shadows swallowed them whole. The city of the future was collapsing before his eyes. Kofi staggered backward, clutching his chest. The chamber's voice echoed all around him, louder than the destruction. Fear is the enemy of all men. Will you face it? Or will you run? The ground split open. From the cracks rose monstrous shapes, towering shadows with burning red eyes. They had no faces, only twisted forms that reached out with clawed hands. Each one whispered his deepest fears. One hissed, "You are nothing but a poor farmer. You cannot save anyone." Another growled, "Your people will laugh at you. They will never follow a fool like you." A third whispered, "Even if you try, you will fail." Kofi's knees shook. His hands trembled. He wanted to turn, to run, to hide. But he saw them. In the distance, his villagers stood, small and fragile against the storm. Children clung to their mothers. The elders leaned on their sticks. Their eyes looked only at him. They were waiting. Kofi's chest rose with a deep breath. His father's voice returned to him again. A man's courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to stand firm despite it. He clenched his fists, raised his head, and shouted at the shadows. "I am afraid, but I will not run. You will not decide my fate." The shadows lunged at him, claws tearing through the air. But as they struck, light exploded from Kofi's chest. The fear dissolved, burned away by his defiance. One by one, the monsters crumbled into smoke, until only silence remained. The ruined city around him flickered like a broken illusion. Slowly, it reshaped itself, the fires gone, the towers rebuilt, the people smiling, walking freely in peace. The villagers who had appeared in the vision bowed their heads to him before fading away. The chamber's voice rumbled, "You have passed the trial of fear. Courage is the shield of a leader." A second glowing doorway appeared, brighter and more unstable than the first. Kofi wiped the sweat from his brow. His heart still thundered, but his resolve had never been stronger. Without hesitation, he stepped through. The second doorway pulled Kofi into a world of silence. He found himself standing in a vast desert of white sand that stretched endlessly in every direction. Above him, the sky was not blue but filled with swirling golden light, as if the heavens themselves were alive. In the center of the desert stood a single stone altar, glowing faintly. On the altar lay something wrapped in cloth. As Kofi drew closer, he saw what it was, his own harvest tools. His hoe, his sickle, his basket, all the things that had carried him through life. The chamber's voice thundered, deeper than before. To claim the future, one must be willing to let go of the past. What will you sacrifice, farmer? Kofi's chest tightened. His tools were more than wood and metal. They were his father's gifts, his livelihood, his connection to the soil of his ancestors. Without them, he was nothing. The voice continued, "The gold you seek is power. But power demands a price. Place upon the altar what you hold most dear." Kofi knelt by the altar, his hands trembling as he touched the tools. Memories surged, his father teaching him to plow the earth, his mother laughing as she carried baskets of yams, the sweat and struggle of every season that had kept him alive. Tears filled his eyes. If I give this up, who will I be? Suddenly, the desert around him shifted. He saw visions again. His village, hungry, weak, children crying for food. The elders clutching their stomachs. The people he loved fading away, one by one. And then, another vision, himself. Alone in the fields, clutching his tools, guarding them fiercely. But behind him, his village was gone. The land was empty. His people had vanished into nothingness. The voice whispered, "Keep your tools. And you keep your past. Give them up. And you gain a future." Kofi's hands shook harder. His heart screamed at him to hold on. But deep inside, another voice spoke, his father's voice once again. "Son, the field you till is not just the soil beneath your feet. It is the people you serve. If they live, the land will live. If they die, all is lost." Kofi clenched his jaw, lifted the tools, and placed them on the altar. The moment he let go, fire erupted from the altar, engulfing the tools in golden flame. They vanished completely, leaving only a glowing seed in their place. The seed floated into Kofi's hands, warm and pulsing with life. The voice thundered, "You have passed the trial of sacrifice. Only those who give up what they love most can hold the future." The desert cracked apart. The sands fell away into darkness, leaving only the third and final doorway before him. Its light was brighter than the sun, blinding and irresistible. Kofi gripped the glowing seed in his hand and stepped forward, his heart ready for whatever awaited him next. The third doorway pulled Kofi into a place unlike any he had ever seen. He was standing in a vast hall of mirrors. But these mirrors did not reflect his body. They reflected his life. One mirror showed him as a boy, running barefoot through the fields, laughing as his father chased him with a wooden stick. Another showed him older, hunched in the sun, struggling to feed himself while others grew rich. Another reflected the man he was now, tired, poor, but still holding hope in his heart. Then came mirrors of what could be. One showed him drowning in gold, sitting on a throne, but with eyes empty and hollow. Another showed him as a forgotten old man, alone in his hut, clutching the glowing seed but surrounded by silence. And then, he saw the last mirror. In it, he stood tall, not in a throne, not in rags, but in front of his people. Children laughed around him, elders sat with pride, and the village thrived. They looked at him not as a king, but as a leader. A man who had given everything for them. The voice of the chamber boomed louder than ever, "Farmer. This is the final trial. Tell us, who are you? A seeker of gold, or a guardian of tomorrow?" Kofi's knees weakened. The mirrors around him pulsed with light, demanding an answer. He thought of his hunger. He thought of his father's struggles. He thought of how easy it would be to choose selfishness, to take the gold and leave the world behind. But then he remembered the children in his village, their thin faces, their innocent laughter. He remembered his mother's words, "A man's worth is not in what he keeps, but in what he gives." Kofi straightened his back and shouted into the chamber, "I am not just a seeker of gold. I am a farmer. My hands were made to plant seeds, to feed others, to give life. If I must choose, then I choose my people. I choose the future." The mirrors shattered in unison, exploding into golden dust that swirled around him like a storm. The ground trembled, and the chamber's voice roared with approval, "You have spoken the truth. You have passed the final trial." In front of him, the dust gathered, forming a grand doorway made of pure light. Beyond it, Kofi could see rolling fields of green, rivers shining like silver, and villages filled with laughter. It was not just a vision, it was a promise. The glowing seed in his hand pulsed brightly, as if alive, ready to be planted. The voice spoke one last time, softer now, almost like a blessing, "Go, farmer. Plant this seed, and the future shall belong to you. And to those who come after you. Kofi stepped through the doorway, his heart steady, his spirit unshaken. He had faced the trials. He had chosen his path. And now, his true journey was only beginning. Kofi stumbled out of the glowing doorway and found himself back in his field. The night sky stretched above him, filled with countless stars, and the cool wind of the village brushed against his skin. For a moment, it almost felt like nothing had happened. But in his hand, the seed still pulsed with light, warm and alive, as if carrying the heartbeat of another world. He looked around. His field was still barren. His hut still humble. The cries of hungry children echoed faintly in the distance. And yet, everything felt different, because he had changed. With steady hands, Kofi dug into the soil, the same dry soil he had struggled with for years. He placed the glowing seed into the ground, covering it gently as though it were the most precious treasure on earth. The moment the soil touched it, the earth trembled. Light burst from the ground, racing across the field like wildfire. The barren land turned green before his eyes. Plants sprouted instantly, tall and strong, bearing fruits and grains richer than any Kofi had ever seen. The air filled with the fragrance of life, and the once empty land became a garden of abundance. The villagers woke and rushed to his field, their eyes wide with awe. Children gasped, elders fell to their knees, and neighbors who once doubted him whispered his name in reverence. "Look!" cried Amma, the young girl from the village. "The land is alive again." In the distance, water gushed from the dry riverbed, flowing freely as though the earth itself had been reborn. Kofi stood among them, tears streaming down his face, not of sorrow, but of joy. He had not found a cave of gold, nor a crown of power. He had found something far greater, the power to give life back to his people. That day, Kofi was no longer just a farmer. He was the man who opened the door to the future. The village thrived in the years that followed. Hunger was forgotten, and hope returned to every heart. And though many asked Kofi what he had seen inside the door, he would only smile and say, "The future is not something you find. It is something you plant." And so, the legend of Kofi, the farmer who found the door to the future, lived on, passed down from generation to generation, a reminder that true wealth is not measured in gold, but in what you leave for those who come after you. If this story of Kofi's door to the future inspired you, imagine the doors waiting in your own life. Subscribe to African Tales Haven for more powerful stories of hope, mystery, and wisdom. Your future begins with the tales you carry. Don't miss the next one.